A great first movie earns love, but a sequel decides whether that love grows, fades, or turns into frustration. Across the Spider-Verse made the first movie bigger, and The Last Wish made people care about Puss in Boots in a way they never did before. Both movies determine the legacies of their franchises. But Ralph Breaks the Internet made many people question if Disney even understood Wreck-It Ralph. So how exactly does a sequel determine a legacy? A sequel determines a legacy in basically 5 ways, starting with respect. But respect for who and for what? To answer this, we need to look at Kung Fu Panda 1 and 2. In the first movie, we met Po, a panda who spent most of his life dreaming about Kung Fu while serving noodles with his father. He loved the Furious Five, worshipped Master Shifu, and imagined himself fighting alongside his heroes. But his problem began when he was chosen as the Dragon Warrior, which everyone felt was a mistake. Even Po struggled to see himself as anything more than an overweight fan who happened to get lucky. Po was thrown into a world where he constantly had to prove he belonged. He failed miserably during training and embarrassed himself in front of the Furious Five. Then Tai Lung escaped prison, and suddenly the fate of the valley rested on the shoulders of somebody who could barely survive a training session. What makes Po's journey special is that he learns his greatest strength comes from accepting himself. When he finally understands that there is no secret ingredient and that the power was inside him all along, everything changes. By the end of the movie, he has earned the respect of the Furious Five, defeated Tai Lung, brought peace to the valley, and gained confidence in who he is. The insecure fanboy had become the Dragon Warrior, like for real. But here is where some sequels make a huge mistake. They take a hero who has already completed an emotional journey and force them to learn the exact same lessons again. I mean, we saw this happen with Ralph Breaks the Internet, remember? However, Kung Fu Panda 2 understands this problem perfectly. So the sequel opens with Po already living his dream. He fights alongside the Furious Five and protects people while still making jokes during battles.
Monkey! Viper! Vicious! Bunny! What?
He has confidence, friends, and purpose. And the writers never ask whether Po believes in himself anymore because the first movie already answered that question. Instead, they give him a completely different challenge. Lord Shen enters the story carrying a symbol that triggers strange memories inside Po. During a battle against Shen's army, Po suddenly freezes after seeing the mark on one of the wolf's armor. Images of his mother flash through his mind for the first time in years. And that is brilliant, because the sequel attacks a wound that the first movie never healed or even addressed. So, as the story unfolds, he learns that Shen was responsible for the destruction of the Panda Village, and that Shen's search for power led him to wipe out the very people Po belonged to. But more importantly, he discovers that his mother sacrificed herself so he could survive. Notice how different this challenge is from the first movie. The sequel respects everything Po earned. His confidence, skills, and friendship all remain intact. The writers treat his previous growth as a permanent foundation and build a harder challenge on top of it. Po grows from an underdog who believes in himself into a master who now understands himself and his origin. That is one way a sequel determines a legacy. There are other ways, though they get trickier from here. In the opening sequence of Across the Spider-Verse, we get this complaint from Miguel.
And don't even get me started on Doctor Strange and the little nerd back on Earth 1999.
In case you didn't catch that, Miguel was ranting about the tampering of the multiverse by Doctor Strange and Peter Parker in Spider-Man No Way Home. There, Strange had botched a spell intended to help Peter, which tore open the multiverse and allowed villains to cross over. For many of us, this was a really unexpected reference, as we may never have thought there were any connections between the two franchises. We even saw a homage at the beginning where Gwen fought that huge lizard. This was a nod to the Amazing Spider-Man. But there were more surprises for us in Across the Spider-Verse. You see, the new movie gave us so many spectacular things that the first movie lacked. We already knew from Into the Spider-Verse that there were multiple universes and spider people, but did we know there was an actual spider society? Nope. We also learned about canon events, which basically means that every spider hero has specific tragic milestones that must happen to keep their universe stable. If anyone messes with these events, an entire universe can collapse and completely unravel. This added tension to the story. All these additions to the original movie are necessary if a sequel is ever to have a chance at determining a legacy. However, expansion can be dangerous if not done well, especially if the sequel becomes so obsessed with adding new things that it forgets what people loved in the first place. Cars 2 is probably one of the clearest examples of this. The original Cars centers on Lightning McQueen's time in Radiator Springs, where characters like Sally, Mater, and Doc Hudson teach him humility, friendship, and community. Then the sequel abandons that small-town heart in favor of a globe-trotting spy adventure filled with secret agents, gadgets, and conspiracies, while pushing Lightning into the background and making Mater the main focus. Basically, Cars 2 expanded its world, but at the detriment of its identity. But Across the Spider-Verse takes the opposite approach. Despite introducing hundreds of spider people, countless dimensions, and enough lore to fill an encyclopedia, the movie never loses sight of Miles Morales for one. Gwen receives a large amount of screen time at the beginning, yet Miles remains the center of the story. His relationships continue driving the emotional core of the film, just as they did in Into the Spider-Verse. Back in the first movie, Miles struggled with expectations from his parents, school, and his new role as Spider-Man. The sequel builds on those same challenges, raising the stakes by tying his father's fate to Miguel's canon event theory. At the same time, it preserves the visual and storytelling style that made the original stand out, bringing back the comic book panels, printed textures, colorful effects, and playful narration.
Obi Brown, I was bitten by. Would you like to know? Yeah, man.
The movie expands the world, raises the stakes, introduces new ideas, and explores places we never knew existed. Yet every expansion circles back to the same character and the same emotional foundation that made audiences care about Miles in the first place. You can see a similar approach in How to Train Your Dragon 2, where Burke grows into a thriving dragon riding society. New lands appear beyond the horizon, and characters like Valka and Drago Bloodfist dramatically widen the scope of the franchise. Yet the story still revolves around Hiccup, Toothless, and the challenge of protecting the peace they fought so hard to create in the first film. That balance is the key. A sequel determines a legacy by honoring the original while expanding it. The audience gets something bigger, but they also recognize the heart of the story they fell in love with years earlier. But while Into the Spider-Verse was epic on its own, sometimes the original might not be that good to begin with. Here, the sequel faces a different challenge. It has to rewrite the audience's memory while creating a legacy. How many of us here even remember the first Puss in Boots movie? Not trying to be harsh, because it wasn't exactly a terrible movie. It had action, humor, fairy tale characters, and a fun adventure built around Puss, Kitty Softpaws, and Humpty Dumpty searching for magic beans. The problem is that there was very little about it that demanded a permanent place in your memory. Once the credits rolled, there was never much to talk about beyond a few entertaining scenes and the fact that it starred one of the most popular characters from Shrek. In many ways, the first movie existed because audiences already loved Puss in Boots. It borrowed a lot of goodwill from the Shrek franchise and gave us an adventure in return. Years later, however, something strange happened. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish arrived and completely changed the conversation around the character. And the movie wastes no time showing us that this is a different kind of story. At the beginning, Puss is exactly the hero we remember. He throws parties, performs impossible stunts, and treats danger like a joke. Then a giant destroys the governor's mansion, a bell crashes onto Puss, and a doctor informs him that he has already burned through 8 of his 9 lives. Suddenly, the entire story changes. For the first time in his life, Puss has something to lose. This gives the sequel a stronger foundation than the original because now every sword fight, chase scene, and mistake carries weight since no extra lives are waiting around the corner for the cat. Then, the movie introduces the character who completely changed how audiences viewed the franchise: Death.
And I don't mean it metaphorically or rhetorically or poetically or theoretically or in any other fancy way.
The wolf first appears in a tavern after Puss casually laughs off the warning about his final life. Within seconds, the mood changes, especially after Puss bleeds for the first time. After that, his confidence disappears. From there, the sequel keeps building on that idea. Puss retreats to Mama Luna's cat sanctuary and buries his identity. The fearless adventurer who once challenged giants now spends his days hiding among dozens of house cats. The movie gives him a deeper emotional journey because it forces him to confront something every person eventually faces: mortality. At the same time, the supporting cast receives a massive upgrade. Kitty Softpaws returns with a stronger role in the story. Their relationship revolves around trust, regret, and second chances. We learn why she walked away from him, why he ran from commitment, and why both of them struggle to let people get close. Then there is Perrito. On paper, Perrito sounds like the kind of sidekick that would become annoying after 5 minutes. Instead, he becomes the emotional heart of the movie. While everyone else is chasing wishes, power, or redemption, Perrito is already happy with his life. He also offers what's probably the best part in the whole movie during Puss's panic attack in the forest. But we can't talk about amazing characters without Goldilocks and the 3 bears. They begin as rivals chasing the same prize, but as the story progresses, we learn that Goldie wants the wishing star because she believes a biological family will finally make her just right. The irony is that the 3 bears already love her as their own. By the end, Goldie realizes the family she spent the entire movie searching for has been standing beside her all along. She was a redeemable villain that worked, but the movie still had room for an irredeemable villain, Jack Horner. While everyone else receives emotional depth, Jack proudly embraces being a terrible person. He steals magical artifacts, kills his henchmen, and enjoys being evil. His absurd personality creates some of the funniest moments in the film and balances the heavier themes surrounding Puss. Even visually, the sequel leaves the original behind. The first movie follows the traditional DreamWorks style of its era. The Last Wish adopts a painterly storybook look with bold colors, dynamic action, and expressive animation. But the greatest achievement of all comes at the climax. When Death arrives for their final duel, Puss stands his ground. He still fears death, but now he values his life enough to fight for it. Most stories about magical wishes end with the hero claiming the prize. Puss reaches the wishing star with 1 life remaining and every reason to restore his lost lives. Instead, he chooses the life he already has. He chooses Kitty, Perrito, and the relationships he spent the movie building. That growth transforms him from a side character in Shrek into one of DreamWorks' strongest protagonists. And that is how this sequel determined its legacy. The Last Wish became so strong that it can stand entirely on its own. A new viewer can skip the original movie, watch The Last Wish, and understand almost everything that matters. Today, when somebody says Puss in Boots, most people immediately think about death, the whistle, the panic attacks, the wishing star, and that final duel in the bright glow of the collapsing star. The sequel became so good that it rewrote the audience's memory of the franchise. But what if instead of rewriting the audience's memory, a sequel decides to weaponize what they already know? Well, this is where things get truly crazy. Something really fascinating but not entirely surprising was revealed during that epic chase scene in Across the Spider-Verse. So Miles Morales had just escaped captivity and was being pursued by practically the entire Spider Society. Miguel was leading the hunt, while others were trying to catch up. The sequence already worked as one of the most exciting action scenes in animation, but hidden inside all that chaos was a revelation that completely changed how we viewed the first movie. Also, the moment hits hard because the first movie had actually been planting clues all along. Think back to Into the Spider-Verse. The spider that bit Miles was glitching from the moment we saw it. While every other spider in the movie belonged to its own reality, this one came from somewhere else entirely after Kingpin's collider started pulling things across dimensions. At the time, most viewers simply didn't think much about the glitching spider, but Across the Spider-Verse takes that little detail and turns it into one of the biggest reveals in the franchise. Miguel explains that the spider came from Earth 42 and was meant to bite somebody else, not Miles.
You're not supposed to be Spider-Man!
No! You're lying! I'm Spider-Man!
You're a mistake!
Suddenly, events from the first movie look completely different, and this is where Across the Spider-Verse does something special. Into the Spider-Verse built itself around one simple idea: anyone can wear the mask, and Miles' leap of faith becomes proof that greatness can come from anywhere. But Across the Spider-Verse takes that exact same theme and pushes it into dangerous territory. Miguel's entire argument challenges the message of the first movie. He reveals that Miles, wearing the mask, created problems across the multiverse. According to the rules of canon, Spider-Man stories follow a pattern. Important people die, and certain tragedies must happen. Every Spider-Person carries those losses with them. Miles, however, exists outside the pattern. For the first time, somebody is arguing that the hero of the original movie should never have become a hero at all. That creates a fascinating question. If anyone can wear the mask, what happens when the universe itself disagrees? Notice how much deeper that is than simply introducing another villain or another world-ending threat. The sequel basically takes the core message of the original and puts it under pressure. But of course, Miles refuses to accept Miguel's view of the world. Throughout the movie, everyone keeps telling him how his story is supposed to unfold. He learns that his father is destined to die because police captains close to Spider-Man always become part of a canon event. The society expects him to accept that outcome for the greater good. Miles chooses a different path. That decision transforms the franchise from a story about becoming Spider-Man into one about defining what Spider-Man should be. Even characters around Miles contribute to this larger theme. Hobie Brown spends much of the movie questioning authority and encouraging independent thinking, while Gwen slowly realizes that following Miguel's rules come at the cost of abandoning her friends. One by one, characters start questioning whether destiny deserves blind obedience. Then comes the ending. Miles finally escapes Miguel and returns to what he believes is his home universe. Except it isn't. The machine sends him to Earth 42 because it identifies him through the spider that gave him his powers. There, Miles discovers a city without Spider-Man. Jefferson Davis is dead. Uncle Aaron is alive. And most shocking of all, the Miles Morales of that world has become the Prowler.
I'm Miles Morales.
People spent years celebrating Into the Spider-Verse because it told an incredible origin story. Then Across the Spider-Verse arrived and transformed that story into part of a much larger conversation about destiny, identity, sacrifice, and free will. As fans wait for the third film, discussions revolve around canon events, Miguel's philosophy, Earth 42, and whether Miles can save his father. The conversation has essentially grown far beyond the original movie, thus defining its legacy. But while a sequel can respect the hero, expand the world, and deepen the theme, there is one final way it can determine a legacy, and this might be the most powerful one of all. Back in 1995, Toy Story introduced us to Andy, a little boy whose entire world revolved around his toys. Woody was his favorite until Buzz Lightyear arrived later and completely disrupted that relationship. As children watching the movie, many of us understood Andy because we were exactly like him. We had favorite toys, became obsessed with new things, and moved from one interest to another without thinking much about it. Yet something interesting happened as the trilogy continued. Andy kept growing. In the first movie, his growth is subtle. When Buzz and Woody go missing, Andy's reaction reveals how much those toys truly mean to him. By the end, he welcomes both of them into his life.
Hey, wow!
What is it?
Woody! Buzz!
Oh, great, you found them. Where were they?
There is room for the old and the new, yet Toy Story 2 pushes that idea further. When Woody's arm gets ripped before cowboy camp, Andy is devastated, but he cares about Woody despite the damage. After Woody returns home with Jessie and Bullseye, Andy immediately writes his name on their feet and makes them part of the family. The movie leaves us with a simple truth. Andy's connection to toys runs deeper than ownership. But even after those endings, one question remained. What happens when Andy grows up? That question stayed with audiences for 11 years. Then Toy Story 3 arrived and answered it in the most satisfying way possible. The movie opens with a fantasy adventure straight out of Andy's imagination. Woody, Buzz, Jessie, Rex, and the rest are still heroes inside his stories. Then the film cuts to reality, and reality hits hard. Andy is 17 years old. College is only a few days away. His room is nearly empty, and most of his childhood toys are already gone. For the first time, the franchise directly confronts something every child eventually experiences: growing up. That idea becomes the emotional engine of the entire movie. The toys spend much of the story worrying about their future. Will Andy take them to college? Will he store them in the attic? Will he throw them away? And even though Woody remains confident in Andy, uncertainty hangs over every scene.
We're getting thrown away!
No one's getting thrown away.
How do you know?
We're being abandoned.
Then comes Sunnyside Daycare, which initially looks like a dream. Children everywhere, endless playtime, a place where toys can stay relevant forever. But the illusion quickly falls apart. Lotso runs the daycare like a prison. The younger children treat toys roughly. Buzz gets reset, and friends become separated. The adventure itself is entertaining, but the deeper purpose sits beneath the surface. The toys are searching for purpose after childhood ends. At the same time, Andy is facing the exact same challenge. That connection is what makes the ending so powerful. Throughout the trilogy, Andy and the toys have always been tied together. As he grows, they grow. As he changes, their lives change. Toy Story 3 finally brings that relationship to its natural conclusion. After escaping Sunnyside and surviving the landfill, Woody realizes the toys deserve another chance to be loved. So he leaves behind a note that leads Andy to Bonnie's house. What follows is one of the most emotional scenes Pixar has ever created. Andy begins taking the toys out of the box one at a time. He introduces Jessie, Bullseye, and Buzz, and with each toy, he shares a piece of their personality. But when it came to Woody's turn, he couldn't let him go. He didn't even want to give him away in the first place. That hesitation matters because Woody represents his entire childhood. Woody was there at the beginning. He was the toy he carried through every adventure. Letting go of Woody means accepting that a chapter of his life has ended.
Now, Woody, he's been my pal for as long as I can remember.
Eventually, he places Woody in Bonnie's hands and joins her for one final play session. Together, they create one last adventure. Then Andy gets into his car and drives away toward college while Bonnie waves goodbye using Woody's arm. The scene works because it concludes two stories at once, Andy's story and ours. Children who watched Toy Story in 1995 were growing up alongside him. By the time Toy Story 3 arrived in 2010, many of those viewers were entering college themselves. The franchise matured alongside its audience. So, Andy's goodbye became our goodbye. That is how the ending defines the Toy Story legacy. The impact extended far beyond the story itself. Toy Story 3 became the first animated film to cross $1 billion worldwide. It received 5 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture and 1 Best Animated Feature. And that is the final way a sequel determines a legacy. Some sequels become memorable because they improve the original or because they deepen its ideas. The strongest sequels provide closure, and because of that ending, Toy Story stopped being a great franchise and became a timeless one. Now that we understand how a grand conclusion seals a movie's legacy, we can look back at what makes the journey so gripping in the first place, like the hidden secrets of crafting an antagonist that genuinely keeps you up at night. In our last video, we looked at how writers create villains so terrifying that a single appearance can haunt an entire franchise.